A 12-parter? Come on, no, go away, not interested. A Fifth Doctor 12-parter, you say? Written by Tim Foley? Yeah, now you have my attention. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and before we dive into the Fifth Doctor Adventures Hooklight, just a quick primer on what the classic series adventures from Big Finish are normally like. For the most part, classic Doctors from Big Finish get 2 releases every year. This year for the Third Doctor, for example, we've got the Brain Drain and the upcoming Operation Vengeance. For the Sixth Doctor, we've got the Cosmos and Mrs. Clark and the upcoming Bad Terms. For the Seventh Doctor, we've got Past Forward and the upcoming Not Titled Yet. And for the 8th Doctor, we've got Causeway and another untitled box set, with also some digressions into the Time War. But this year, for the 5th Doctor, we've got Hooklight Part 1 and Hooklight Part 2, written by Tim Foley. These are 2 6-part box sets which tell one epic story. Actually, when you think about it, it's more like an 18-part story because it's a sequel to The Great Beyond from last year, written by James Kettle, a release which has an awesome cover and a great premise, but I don't think stuck the landing and really dragged across its 6 parts. So following a slog of a 6-parter with a 12-parter, that seems a bit like a recipe for disaster. However, when that's written by Tim Foley, I'm willing to give it a shot. This review is going to cover both installments, Hooklight Part 1 and Hooklight Part 2, because this is one big epic story. And also, as you can tell from the cover of Hooklight Part 2, minor spoiler, like I said, it's on the cover, this is also an 8th Doctor adventure. So what is Hooklight about? Well, it's a sequel to The Great Beyond, with that story ending with the TARDIS running aground and running out of power. It turns out that it's run aground on the world of Mourning. The 5th Doctor, played by Peter Davison, joins companions Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, played by Matthew Waterhouse, Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding respectively. They go and explore Mourning, and they find a great big museum, the Hall of Antiquities, and there they find an ancient lamp called Hooklight. And Hooklight is an ancient force that is anchoring the TARDIS in Mourning. It's disabling its temporal functions, the inside is now getting smaller, the TARDIS can't go anywhere, and it turns out that Hooklight is a unique form of light that can stop and freeze time. And with the Doctor and the TARDIS's arrival, Hooklight is re-emerging, setting forth a cosmic chain of events, because there is a light that must never be lit. And thus begins an epic 12-part quest where the 5th Doctor and his companions are scattered, they meet a whole group of other supporting characters, they form essentially a fellowship, as they all make their way to the Dark Forge. And if the format of this story is starting to sound familiar, we'll get to that in a moment, but here's a clip.
I hate to keep us all from any relief effort that's starting up, but I'm afraid this is important. We believe, that is, Dr. Miles and I hypothesize that the substance trapped in that lantern is what is known as Hooklight.
Seriously?
Incredible, I know. And you're going to have to tell me and Nyssa what that is, because you keep mentioning it.
Simply put, Hooklight is a special kind of light that should not exist in this reality. Not even the Time Lords know much about it, except to acknowledge that it's one of the most destructive elements they've ever encountered. There are warnings about it in the Matrix, and it's said to possess one very dangerous property.
And that is?
It can stop time. When fully aglow, anything that basks in its light will be suspended in a single moment.
So it's a temporal Medusa?
If you like.
But it's shining right now. It hasn't suspended anything.
Perhaps it's just the smallest slither in there. Perhaps the glass of that lantern is somehow filtering it, shielding it. I wish I could analyze it. If I dared to get any closer. You saw how the TARDIS reacted. Just a pinprick of that light, a great distance from the ship, and all its systems decayed. If it had remained there any longer...
So we shouldn't go near it?
Nyssa seems unaffected by it, but I find myself utterly repulsed by it, and I'd swear it's getting brighter.
Even before the behind-the-scenes interviews with Tim Foley confirmed it, when I was listening to Hooklight Part 1, I was thinking, this sounds an awful lot like the Lord of the Rings. Hooklight is the One Ring of Power, Nyssa is the ring bearer, is Frodo. We have this group of ancient women called the Dawn Bride who are very similar to the elves. Specifically, we also have Great Mother Merla who is like Galadriel. We have an adventurer called Davlin Crooks who is sort of like Aragorn meets Lord Flashheart. Davlin Crooks, played by Kieran Brew, introduces himself as pan-galactic, pan-romantic, pandemonium personified. So I don't know, maybe the Lord of the Rings purists will come in the comment section and say, oh, so he is just like Aragorn. Aragorn. We also have a giant spider in the third act of the story. We have this epic mythic backstory where this Isildur type character managed to banish Hooklight with the Blade of Time, but in this case he's called the Oracle. I bet you can't guess who the Oracle is. The Doctor seems to think it's the Master, but who else do you think it could be? Who else do you think the Oracle in this story could be? But the thing about Hooklight, and I think what makes it such an incredible adventure, is because Tim Foley, typically with his characters, writes them so textured and nuanced right out of the gate. Within a scene or two of a Tim Foley character, you basically know what their deal is, and they're always given these great nuances and idiosyncrasies to really make them memorable. So what do you do when you start with that texture, and then you're able to flesh it out and expand it for 12 episodes? You get really fun and memorable characters, and that also extends to the main TARDIS trio. Nyssa is essentially the light bearer. She is the one tasked with taking Hooklight to the other end of the universe to do whatever she needs to do with it, but it also becomes a corrupting force within her, meaning that she has conversations with herself, meaning that Nyssa essentially fills the Frodo and Gollum role in this story, and Sarah Sutton is clearly having a great time having conversations with herself, and it's a really great performance. But it's also a story where Nyssa is trying to find an outlet for the power. She's told everywhere that Hooklight is a corrosive, universe-ending destructive force, but she thinks that she can maybe even use it to bring back the people of Traken, to try and right the wrongs that it has inflicted on the universe in the past.
We fret for our future, watch for the Nygard, face them in the dark. So perhaps you'll dismiss my warning, think me overcautious.
What warning?
You are a bright child, Nyssa. But I fear you do not comprehend the brightness that has been placed on you. The burden. Hooklight is a dangerous flame. It will snare the shadows in your soul, even one as unblemished as yours. I think it does speak to you. I think it purports to have life. And I think you feel persuaded to keep it hidden.
I'm so confused by it.
You must resist its allure. There is no poor creature trapped inside. It is a deadly force. You cannot reason with fire.
What can I do about it?
You could give the lantern to me. If you will it, I would take it.
I couldn't do that to you.
Why should you assume this mantle? You, a stranger to our shores.
You also have a really great arc with Adric early on, and I think Tim Foley does have a soft spot for Adric because he's so well characterized in his stories. Very early on in the story, the Fifth Doctor has a go at Adric and it's like, no Adric, you can't fly the TARDIS. And then when it's required for him to fly the TARDIS in an emergency situation, the Doctor's like, oh no, I was just lying, you're worth 10 Time Lords. And Adric kind of takes that literally, so when he meets Davlin Crooks, who knows of the Doctor apparently and has had previous adventures with the Doctor before, Davlin mistakes Adric for the Doctor, and Adric sort of plays along, and he's like, yeah, I can be the Doctor. I even get a dashing outfit and a wonderful cloak that billows in the wind when I run down corridors. And that arc is really fascinating. But believe it or not, it's Tegan who gets one of the most compelling arcs of the story. In Hooklight Part 2, it's in Part 8 of the story, but it's basically a bottle episode where Tegan is essentially marooned on this planet, this ice cap world called Nib, and she meets Oscar, played by Shogo Miyakita, and he has to slay a Beorn, which sounds very similar to a creature from Lord of the Rings once again. And the episode is basically a Tegan and Oscar two-hander as they traverse the wastelands, get to know each other, and Oscar and Tegan kind of fall in love with each other, and Tegan has to figure out where her alliances really lie. Will she stay with the Doctor and try and make her way back to Heathrow, or will she start a new life on this world with Oscar? At the end of the day, what does Tegan want from time and space? It's lovely character work. But it's not just our main cast who are able to excel in this story, it's also the supporting cast. I mentioned Davlin Crooks, who is so much fun, like I said, like a cross between Aragorn and Flashheart. We also have guest actor Celia Imrie playing Dr. Kessica Miles, who's the leading chronicler in the World of Mourning, and we learn very early on that she's been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and this is essentially the last adventure that she's going to have in her life, and she doesn't quite know what to do with herself in this scenario. And the way she rises to the occasion. The actions she takes, particularly in the second half of the story, are just really touching and moving. There's a brilliant scene with her and Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor, just two great actors just bouncing off each other, where they talk about her fate and they talk about this opera that she doesn't want to listen to because it has very similar parallels to her life, and it's just really wonderful stuff. You have Alan Cox as the Halcyon, who is this clone ruler of mourning. Whenever he dies, he's cloned again, and that just restarts the legacy. And even though he is a pretty simplistic character, you know, he's really arrogant, he's so self-serving, he believes he's the only person capable of ruling this world, which is why he's cloned himself. Over the course of the story, there's a really great tragedy that unfurls with this character as we go into his past and what inspired this thought process. We even have a Boromir-esque character, but it will be a spoiler to say who it is. But yeah, just a really great supporting cast of characters, and even though this is a 12-part story, there is a really consistent through line running under it, and that is power. Hooklight obviously represents this extreme form of power that can stop time, but Hooklight the story is about all sorts of powers, whether it be the Halcyon wanting the power over his own legacy, Nyssa wanting to wield the power of Hooklight for good, Adric wanting the power that comes with being the main character of the story, the Fifth Doctor wanting the power of predetermination, wanting to know what's happening in the future, further complicated with the Eighth Doctor who wants the power to be able to change the past, especially when it comes to characters like Adric. There's a wonderful scene with Paul McGann and Matthew Waterhouse where the Eighth Doctor is like, God, I wish I could warn you what's coming up. But the one I found the most profound was the power that Kessica wants to wield, and that's the power to choose the ending of her own story.
I thought the soothsayers were a lie, a myth.
I'm no soothsayer, though I used to see the future a lot, back when I first wore this face. Giddy with a new body, a new millennium. But I quickly learned it was an unwelcome gift. Glimpses of what would happen to Charlie, Audacity, Kerry's. I had to push them to the back of my mind. It's only now, when everything is at stake, that I forced myself to see the future again.
And what do you see?
A kaleidoscope of chaos.
Do you see what'll happen to me?
I see that you'll head back home and find your reward for assisting me lying on your bed. Your old teddy bear, lost when you were 8.
Impossible.
I hope it helps you sleep better at night. I wish I could.
He has found the Dark Forge. I repeat, he has found the Dark Forge.
Excellent. Signal Davlin. Get him in position. He needs to volunteer as pilot. I'm currently in the Third Age. Dr. Miles is about to open the puzzle box, I hope. Please, Kessica, figure this one out.
There's lots of lore, planets, species, and items thrown at you in every single episode, but because it's kept to just the information that the Doctor and his companions are learning for the first time and information that they need to know, it somehow feels manageable. If this was prose, if Hooklight was a book, it might feel overwhelming, but in the audio medium it strikes just the right balance. The audio medium is also the best way, I think, to display the intricate back and forth between Nyssa in this story as she's bounced across settings, kind of similar to like in Lord of the Rings when Frodo puts on the One Ring and he sort of flits between dimensions. There's a wonderful tragic element to the Eighth Doctor where he wants to preserve the innocence and the happy days of the Fifth Doctor, not just before the Time War. Apparently the Eighth Doctor is here because the Time Lords want to use Hooklight in the Time War, but he also wants to go back to help the Fifth Doctor before Earthshock, and it goes against every fibre of his being to not do that. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how good a writer you are. 12 episodes is a lot of material, and no matter how good that material is, boredom and stagnation can kick in unless you have structural diversions in the story, and Tim Foley has applied that to Hooklight. Like I mentioned, there's that episode which is essentially a two-hander between Tegan and Oscar, and because we're dealing with a Lord of the Rings fellowship here, they have split up the cast, meaning that you don't have this issue, because you are changing settings, you are going from world to world, you're having these different character combinations throughout the story as they flitter throughout time, and that's the aspect that Hooklight is able to diverge away from Lord of the Rings, because this is a Doctor Who story, so there's timey-wimey elements, there's time time travel, there's going back into your own time stream, something that Lord of the Rings really couldn't do. And the stakes keep on rising. There's some really terrific cliffhangers in Hooklight. Hooklight actually starts more or less with a mass casualty event, and we're able to actually dive into that and how it impacts the characters involved, because this is a 12-part story and that we can play with it. But also in Hooklight Part 2 specifically, brilliant cliffhanger endings. I think the cliffhanger ending to Part 10 is my favourite Big Finish Doctor Who cliffhanger of 2025 so far. Is there anything I didn't like about Hooklight? Honestly, nothing really springs to mind. I'm reluctant to call it a perfect story just because I can't really think of anything that was really wrong with it. But this really just reads as peak Doctor Who. It's Doctor Who at its most grandiose, at its most mythic, at its most epic. It takes one of the biggest TARDIS teams in Doctor Who's history on TV and scatters them to the winds for their own epic adventures, and it actually dives into those characters and utilizes them, including the Fifth Doctor, who gets to do some capital A acting in this story, and Peter Davison really thrives in that environment, and having the twist of it being an Eighth Doctor story also, where he's sort of this weird figure in the background, I thought that was really endearing and really, really effective. I've read a couple of reviews that lament that Hooklight doesn't have one big central antagonist, sort of like Sauron or Saruman, but I kind of disagree with that. Hooklight itself does serve that purpose. Just like Nyssa is Frodo and Gollum, Hooklight is Sauron and the Ring. But even then, one big central antagonist could take away from all of the other character arcs across Hooklight, because this is a story about the journey, not necessarily the destination, kind of like Lord of the Rings, of course. And when you combine that with Tim Foley's approach to character, how he's able to make characters feel so textured and alive right out of the gate, like we're introduced to characters who have already lived full lives before the Doctor and his friends even land on their world, and then you continue that journey for 12 more episodes. It's a terrific epic with brilliant characters, and this was a risky gambit. It's a 6-hour story. If you're not on board with it, you're stuck with it for 6 hours, especially if you have purchased both parts of this. It was risky, but I'm so excited and happy to say that for me, it paid off. I really loved Hooklight. And if you have 6 hours to spare, not to mention the monetary investment, I guess, then I really think you should check it out. Thank you so much for watching my review of Doctor Who The Fifth Doctor Adventures Hooklight Part 1 and Part 2. What did you think of Hooklight? I want to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for more Big Finish reviews, hit that like button, and folks, I'll see you all next time.